councillors and members of the public and press. Thank you very much for joining us. So, if we go straight to business, I think the meeting is starting at 7:31. And I'll move straight to agenda item point 1, apologies for absence. Not been notified of any? Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest, are there any? Councillor Durden.
Sorry, can I declare a non-pecuniary interest as a non-executive HDS, because I'm going to be asking questions in that regarding the follow-up plan.
You may indeed. That being that, we move on to item 3, minutes, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of October 2021. Do we all approve those? Approved. Okay, moving on to item 4. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. Page 5, the Community Resilience Strategy. My question is, when will it go out for consultation? And what is the process for councillors? And will the discussion on points raised in Cabinet, the last Cabinet, be taken into account, or do the points there that were raised, do they have to be submitted?
Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. The consultation on the community resilience strategy is commencing, and one of the examples of the specific consultation sessions will be at the COVID recovery working group on the 9th of November, where councillors will, for example, have an opportunity to have an extended consultation session around the strategic principles that were set out in that strategy. But look, we're very excited to get out there and speak to not just councillors but community leaders and the general public about what the priorities should be for our community resilience as we attempt to build back better from COVID-19.
Are there any other matters arising? So, you have another matter arising, Councillor Edwards?
Relates to the same matter.
Just if I remember rightly, it talked about a 6-week period for consultation, so I was asking for a date as to when the consultation is starting. And I would also repeat my question. So in terms of the discussion that goes on the COVID recovery group, that's fine for councillors that are on that group. But what about in terms of the other councillors that aren't on that particular group? What would be the process for them to ensure that if they've got any comments, they get reflected in the comments coming back?
Thank you, Chair. The COVID specific COVID recovery working group session on the 9th of November is the start of the consultation with councillors. In particular, it gives opposition and administration councillors the opportunity to feed in their thoughts on the strategy. But of course, the consultation commences, and we're looking forward to engaging not just councillors but members of the public about a strategy that's focusing on our resilience coming out of the lockdowns that we've incurred. I look forward to setting out those principles in due course.
Thank you very much. Any other matters arising? Okay, thank you very much. Then we move on to item 5, written questions from the public. I believe we have 2. And the first one is from Mr. Jack Shepherd to Councillor Dan Salt. Mr. Shepherd, would you like to take the microphone? And so, would you like the question read and the answers taken, or would you like to read it out?
I'd like to read it. I'd like to read it out if that's okay.
That's fine.
And if I may, could I just preface my question by saying a thank you to everyone who helped organise, coordinate and of course participate in this year's Harlow Town Centre Awards. My question is in no way an aim at those who helped raise Harlow up. My question, as you can see, is aimed at this administration and its decision to appoint
Thank you. Mr. Shepherd, we appreciate your preface, but this is a question and answer session, so could you move to the question, please?
I will. Given the role of Carrigan Property in presiding over Terminus House and Templefield House, 2 of the 12 permitted development right conversions which have been described by one Carrigan resident as an open prison, why has this council welcomed Carrigan as the official 2021 partner sponsor?
Councillor's thoughts?
As I've made clear many times, it was because of the previous administration's failure to act in introducing the Article 4 directive when they should have done, that allowed for office to residential conversions to take place in this town. I've never heard that administration or anyone in it apologise for their failure to act, nor did they purchase Terminus House when it was offered to the council for a grand total of £1. For both of those reasons, the issues that are faced are because of the previous administration's failure to act. We are acting and we have applied to massively strengthen the Article 4 directive so that never again can this allowed to happen in such a way. I look forward to updating councillors and residents on our progress in tackling the issues left by the previous administration in this area. Specifically on the Town Centre Awards, I'm sure Ms Shepherd would agree that they were a roaring success. I don't know who the host was, but nevertheless, with over 120 people attending and celebrating all that is great about our town centre. Not only was it a roaring success, but it came at no expense to the taxpayer, as 12 very generous sponsors paid for the fantastic event. Sponsorship was open to all, and Carrigan were one of the 12 sponsors. Sponsorship is not in any way an endorsement by any of the partnerships. I believe that we must deal with the world as it is, and not as we may wish it to be. That's why it's important to actively engage with all building landowners and businesses to ensure that we deliver and do not hit the roadblock of no communication. This approach is the best way to deliver one of the primary ambitions for the town centre, to be a hub for the community that everyone can share a renewed sense of pride in.
Mr. Shepherd, do you have a supplementary?
I do. And I will just say,
Mr. Shepherd, sorry, you're not going to preface your question,
no,
Thank
it's
you.
a very straightforward question. Can Councillor Swords see why many would be mystified as to why this administration would have chosen Carrigan as a corporate sponsor for this year's Harlow Town Centre Awards?
I think anyone that perhaps were mystified after listening to my answer a few moments ago may no longer be mystified.
Thank you. Mr. Shepherd, do you have a second question?
Point of order.
No,
Point of order.
No.
The Nolan
Turn your
principle.
microphone off and listen. You've asked for a point of order. You will listen to the response. Please take your microphone off because we're getting feedback. There is no point of order. Mr. Shepherd has asked his question. It's the portfolio holder how he answers it. If you aren't happy with the answer, please write to the portfolio holder in writing. I'm now moving on to Mr. Shepherd's
Sorry,
second
could I
question.
object? Under the
No, you
Nolan
cannot
principle,
object.
under the Nolan principle, under the Nolan principle, we
Mr.
should be respectful.
I will ask you. I will ask you. Mr. Sauce, thank you. I will ask you to follow the constitution of this council. There is no point where you can raise what you've just done under the constitution. If it is, please feel free to let me know in writing what point you wanted to raise under the constitution and where, and I will be happy to look into that. But I'm now going to move on to Mr. Shepherd's second question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll put in a complaint.
Thank you. Mr. Shepherd, your second question, please.
Thank you. Again, no preface, just straight to the question. As the sole youth representative of Harlow, Gilston, Garden Towns, Village 1 Master Planning Working Group, I quote the terms of reference for the group. In the event of a member organisation failing to attend 2 consecutive meetings, the group can agree to inviting a different organisation or individual. Councillor Michael Hardware, the named single representative on behalf of Harlow District Council, has failed, without offering any apologies to the chair or by any other members, as far as I am aware, to attend 2 consecutive meetings. Will this administration take action to represent Harlow District Council within the collaborative design process, which directly seeks to represent and respond to the views and concerns of local residents?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I was invited in May this year by Places for People, the Gilston developer, to join several groups to participate in the delivery of its engagement strategy to support the various planning applications it was progressing. The master planning processes for all the developments around Harlow are important, especially so the 7 villages of Gilston, as this is where the majority of the growth for Harlow is going to come. Given the physical proximity of Gilston to Harlow and our shared vision for the garden town, they need to reflect our aspirations and be designed to be integrated with Harlow, ensuring new residents feel part of this community and that existing Harlow residents view them as an integral part of the town. I have been unable to attend the first 2 meetings I was invited to, one in July and the other in September. I had prior engagements for both. I had no deputy to send in my stead and an officer representative was not allowed. Harlow Council is currently in discussion with East Herts District Council about ensuring appropriate representation. Hopefully, we will be able to resolve this with the future meetings to ensure Harlow can participate fully. Thank you.
Mr. Shepherd, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. My question is quite simple. Can Councillor Harlow understand why it's perhaps embarrassing as the sole representative from Harlow to be the only person from Harlow in attendance for 2 meetings in this very important process?
Yes, I can. And there are numerous emails that were exchanged with the organisers of the meetings. Because I couldn't attend, apologies were offered, were submitted, but there was no way to get around this impasse of not being able to send a deputy and not being able to send an officer. Hopefully we'll resolve that in the near future.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's all the questions from the public. Thank you, Mr. Shepherd, for your questions. Much appreciated. If we move on now to questions from councillors under item 6. Questions from councillors. Councillor Vince, I believe you want to ask me a question.
Thank you, Chair. Can the Administrator explain why Harlow's bid for the Levelling Up Fund was unsuccessful and what reassurances can they give when the second wave of funding comes available in spring of next year and Harlow will be successful?
Thank you for your question. Harlow Council's bid for Playhouse Quarter and Stonecross Square was submitted in the first round of the government competition for the Levelling Up Fund. In June, we secured £23.7 million from the government to kickstart key regeneration projects. We submitted a bid as part of the Levelling Up Fund for further investment to support our regeneration plans. Our bid was scored very highly by government officials and we have been invited into the second round of funding expected in the spring of next year. The Council strongly welcomes this as it gives our new administration more time to ensure our bid fits into our wider regeneration plans. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Ness?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's interesting that not long ago, £10 million of funding we didn't get was hugely disappointing, shocking. We get 20 million that we didn't get this time. It's only a small pot. My question, yes, sorry, Chair. My question is, just we find when was the bid of 23.7 million submitted?
I'll get Council Officer to give you that date in writing. Question 2, Councillor Tony Edwards to Councillor John Charles. Councillor Edwards.
Noting the next meeting of the COVID Recovery Working Group has now been scheduled for the 9th of November, could the Community Resilience Portfolio Holder explain what he understands to be the terms of reference of the working group and why the group has only had 1 meeting, 28th of June, since the Conservative administration took office in May of this year?
Thank you, Chair. Annual full council, the working group meeting dates for the municipal year were agreed formally. It was agreed by annual full council that meetings would only be held on a quarterly basis. The September meeting was postponed because it clashed with another meeting. At the point where we were planning for the meeting to be moved, infection rates in the town had dropped and the governance cycle meant that the meeting was not able to be arranged. It was agreed that the COVID recovery working group would meet early this month. I can confirm that the working group will be held on the 9th of November. Members of the working group should receive the agenda shortly. The Council continues to monitor COVID-19 infection levels in the town carefully and stands ready to work closely with all community leaders to do everything possible to safeguard public health if circumstances change. Now, Chair, I don't propose to read out the full terms of reference, but they are there for members to read.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Edmonds?
Yeah, I do. Noting that between the 22nd of July last year and the 22nd of March this year, there were 10 meetings. That was the importance of given to it at that time. And noting that I hear now that it has now been reduced to quarterly meetings, and noting that the COVID pandemic is not over yet by a long way, will there be a facility to revisit with the members of that group the frequency of meetings and look at and to ensure, because it's and given the enormity of the agenda that we are going to have to tackle, we have the opportunity of meeting on a more frequent basis to address the issues that are likely to come forward.
So, Councillor, there's quite a long question. You're asking what will the frequency of meetings be?
Given
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to discuss at the next COVID recovery working group on the 9th of November the frequency of meetings. We obviously need to keep the situation, in particular around COVID infections, under constant review. The Council just do this. There are two key things I'll just add on the back of what Councillor Edmonds has said. The Council has already commenced activity around community resilience with the strategy and the consultation going forward. And you'll see on the agenda later this evening that we've set out a positioning statement around our health and wellbeing strategy and the considerations we want to take forward. I am very keen and look forward to the thoughts of all members on that cross-party working group, but my commitment to that working group is that we will keep this situation under review and we look at the frequency of our engagements to determine what action needs to be taken going forward. But I look forward to that discussion coming up only next week.
Thank you. Okay, that's questions from the councillors. Moving on to item 7, petitions. None have been submitted. Moving on to item 8, the forward work plan found on pages 3 to 19 of the main pack of papers. Any questions on the forward work plan? Yes, Councillor Durban.
Thank you, Chair, and I do hope we can adhere to the known principles. I do notice that a number of portfolio holders and lead officers have changed, because clearly Andrews Johnson's name appears in these, and I was just wondering why there hasn't been an update on that particular issue. And then I've got about 3 or 4 other questions, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. So I've been meeting with members of my administration to look at appointments and from the Cabinet all the way down to committees and working groups. A leader's decision will be finalised on that sometime over the weekend, so by Monday officers will have that, and then the forward work plan will be updated to reflect that.
Thank you very much. My questions in relation to the forward plan are very similar to questions that I've asked before, and that's why I've declared my non-pecuniary as a HGS. I spoke on the forward plan for 10/13/04 onwards, which is basically all on page 8, and I was asking what involvement was HTS going to be having in relation to securing funding for the external refurbishment. And I was assured by Councillor Carter they would be consulted, and there would be opportunities depending on the type of work. I was therefore quite surprised when I asked the question at HTS what consultation had been taking place, and I was told none. So I was just wondering whether or not Councillor Carter could just update us on what is happening regarding our main team at HTS in relation to these external contracts.
Councillor Carter.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just remind Councillor Durkin he does in fact have a pecuniary interest.
Do I? Oh, okay. Not a non-pecuniary.
What?
Do I have a pecuniary or non-pecuniary?
Are you-
You told me non-pecuniary.
I will refer to the monitoring officer for clarity over that one before we progress.
I'm sure I've got it written down somewhere.
Mr Hill, can you clarify the situation, please?
Councillor Durkin receives expenses or a stipend from HTS as a pecuniary interest.
I have a pecuniary.
Can we, just for the sake of the minutes of the committee club, could we amend Councillor Durkin's then under declarations of interest? Thank you very much. Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Sorry, can you just remind me what I'm supposed to have said?
Yes, absolutely. At the last cabinet meeting when I asked the same question, you gave me assurances that where we could, we would be asking HTS to be dealing with the refurbishment of these 4 areas that were identified, but you also said, however, some of that may well be outside the scope of HTS because there will be asbestos.
Yes.
And when I went back to HTS to ask what activity has taken place with us being offered work or us offering HTS, I have received that up to this date I've been told that there's been no communication from the council regarding the possibility of offering work to HTS.
I think I may have to refer to my officer.
Mr Murray?
I think I can help there, Councillor Durkin. I think every year the council talks to HTS about its capital programme.
Could you just come a bit nearer to your mic with your mask on?
Every year the council talks to HTS about its capital programmes, both non-housing and housing. And within the limits of its financial resources, it decides and determines together what can be allocated to HTS P&E and what needs to go out to procurement. And there are constraints and restraints around that, particularly where there are leaseholders involved. So leaseholders have to have their work tendered, and HTS are very aware of that. And so we're working with HTS to deliver their recovery plans, to deliver the backup capital plan works for the last year and a half. And we're working very closely in the next year and a half, so we can get on track to deliver the 5-year capital programme.
Thank you very much. So we've got a cabinet report that's going to come to make a decision in 4 weeks' time.
I did have other councillors asking for questions. Is this a supplementary to that question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just repeat it then. For a supplementary, thank you very much, but can I just confirm, is it my understanding that a report is coming to this council for a key decision to be made in 4 weeks, and up to this particular point, our own company, HTS, have not been asked in relation to any of these refurbs?
They would have been consulted during the year, and we would have deemed it would be not appropriate for them to be, because we have to go out to tender because of the leasehold issue, and they are fully aware of that.
Thank you. My next one is 10.12.618, which is the local tax scheme, and I read this with interest and I look forward to the report. Will this also contain the Tories' promise of a tax rebate, which will be backdated to May?
I'll take the question. 10.12.618 on page 10. Okay. So, as you will be aware, having been a former leader of the council yourself, Councillor Durkin, that any announcements made around budget are usually made around towards the end of January, where they're debated at cabinet and then they're moved at full council subsequent to that. any movements during the year wouldn't be prudent or right. So at the December Cabinet, no, that won't be the case.
Thank you very much. So my supplementary is, sorry, I've got a bit of a hearing problem. So actually there is, even though there was a commitment made to the town that the first thing that you would do if you got elected was to give a tax rebate, that is still not planned to occur.
Seeing as you're straying slightly from the papers here, and you're moving into the realms of what's printed in the media, I may draw you to recent press releases by this administration, and I will say, me personally, where I turned around and said that when we came into administration, we would begin to review the council's finances immediately, which is indeed what we did. I have not made any personal undertaking to cut tax immediately, and I would ask you to stick your questions to what is printed in the papers tonight, and not start drawing in party political discussion from what goes on in the media, leaflets, or any other outlet. We are focusing on what's in the papers. You asked me when you're going to get an announcement. I told you in January. If you have any questions around the forward work plan, I would like to make some progress this evening. So could you please keep it to the papers in hand? Thank you very much.
My third question is in relation to 10.12.484, which is a similar question that I asked the previous Cabinet member around compulsory purchase, and it's advance of development of Harlow, Gilston, Garden Town. Being mindful of the comments that the Regeneration Cabinet member has said about buying property in the town centre, is this compulsory purchase advance of development for Harlow, Gilston, Garden Town only, or is it a town-wide compulsory purchase decision?
As that on the, if you're referring to 10.12.484 on page 13, Councillor Durkin, if I heard you correctly, that is under the portfolio of the strategic growth, which is Councillor Harlow. So I'll ask him to answer that question.
Thank you.
Councillor Harlow.
It just refers to the Stalks crossing, not the whole town.
Is it possible, therefore, that we can, you may well want to amend the report to say only rather than, because again, there are concerns about compulsory purchase of the town centre, including Acacia House.
We'll note what you say and we'll come back to you with an answer on that. Can we move on to any other questions from the full work plan?
Sorry, I've got just one more, I promise, and then some that aren't there. In relation to 10.12.926, this is about the operational buildings and the contract that is going to be awarded. Would the portfolio holder be able to reassure me how does this connect to the scoping document that HTS is currently working with the council on regarding its future business strategy?
Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reassure Councillor Durkin that, of course, the ambition, now that we have signed off the scoping paper, is that we present the HTS Group business plan in February. Before we get to February, one of the intentions is to launch a whole series of business strategy working groups, and I very much look forward to engaging members in that process. There are a range of matters to discuss, not only the market opportunities, but what is currently within the pipeline that Harlow Council, with its company as the shareholder, can deliver in collaboration going forward. But those workshop sessions will be carried through the next month as we endeavour to meet that important deadline in February around the final business plan, which I know for all members, irrespective of colours, is an important milestone.
Supplementary, I warmly welcome, but on the forward plan, I can't see where the scoping of HTS it has been allocated. So is that still pending in the same way? There's nothing pending about Council House building, there's nothing about Town Centre consultation, there's nothing about Acacia House.
Councillor Durkin your first question, and I think it was a number, I think that's a fair challenge around how reflecting where the process to deliver the business plan for HGS is being funneled. The mechanism for that is the shareholder subcommittee. And look, like Councillor Davis, I very much welcome you attending the shareholder subcommittee as we attempt to build out the business plan. Then there is a crucial role as we get that work fully underway around finalising that business plan for February. And I look forward to your thoughts and engagement in that process.
Okay, I believe Councillor Evans has a question on the forward work plan.
Please. Page 16, 10-12-875 and 10-12-876, community safety strategy and the community engagement strategy. What will be the process for drawing up these strategies prior to them being presented to Cabinet in March?
Councillor Evans, I'm going to allow Councillor Charles to answer your question in a moment. I am cognizant that many of these questions are actually starting to delve into what will be in these papers in a very technical way, and the whole point of having a forward work plan is that this schedules out those discussions, so rather than having small questions around what recommendations, what parts, what processes, what consultation, that's the whole point of the paper coming later on in the year. This forward work plan is the same forward work plan that was published at last Cabinet and the Cabinet before that and the Cabinet before that. And it is like a death by 1,000 cuts every time we keep getting little questions. I don't mind substantive questions, or some like Councillor Durkin's raised tonight, where he's concerned that something's not going to be delivered on time. But as to actually the substance of what's going into these papers continually, we can't keep asking the same questions until we've got the papers in front of us. That's the whole very point, the nature of the forward work plan. So on this one occasion, I'm going to allow Councillor Charles to answer your question, but in future, can we try and keep it to technicalities around when we're expecting papers to come to us, and perhaps why things might not have happened in the manner in which we would. This is a very procedural document. The questions, the debates, the comments come in the actual papers themselves when they're presented. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reinforce that point, what I would say to Councillor was there is internal working group process that we have set up, Jane and I, with the principal officers that are involved in specific elements of strategy for developing out these milestone documents. We develop those documents that go through a sense checking process within the council, which I'm sure you're already familiar with. What I would say to Council is we will, before we go to cabinets where these papers are presented, I'm more than happy to sit down either with him and Jane, or Jane will sit down with you, Councillor Edwards, to go through these documents before they are presented to the respective cabinet meeting. And that has been a convention that we started with the community strategy. So I'm very happy to continue that process so that you're engaged in when these papers are coming up. They're in the forward work plan, but we will give you pre-briefing as and when it's appropriate.
And before we go to any more questions, I would just like to re-emphasise the offer to all opposition members that hold a shadow portfolio position. All of the council officers do make themselves available to you, so you can be engaged in that process. And we as administration, as even my predecessor actively encouraged and was very happy for opposition members to be engaged in those kinds of processes. And I as a new leader also extend that same courtesy to you, because I think it's a vital part of the democratic process that you're as brief as you can be when you come to these meetings. Are there any more questions of the forward work plan itself?
As I was mentioned, I just come back very briefly.
I will allow you to come back.
Thank you. I welcome what's been said in terms of and certainly I have had the opportunity of meeting with the officers. Unfortunately, Councillor Charles and I haven't had the opportunity of meeting in I think we had one meeting scheduled, but unfortunately I was unable to make it on that occasion, so my apologies to him on that occasion. But we've not had the opportunity of meeting. But what I've also been concerned about is that particularly the community resilience strategy that was presented without there being any any prior discussion with, as far as I can see, with any councillors and what have you that was presented, and we're then following up in terms of the mopping up, in terms of consultation. So that's why I wanted to be clear about what the expectations were in terms of the development of the community safety and the community engagement strategies. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts and concerns. Let's move on now to item 9 on pages 20 to 39 of the pack. And that's the Rolling Infrastructure Fund Memorandum of Understanding. And I look to my esteemed colleague, Councillor Harlow, to propose the paper.
Thank you, Chair. This memorandum of understanding is, as it says, an agreement between the 5 Garden Town partners. It refers to the administration and spending of the Rolling Infrastructure Fund, or RIF, as it's called. The RIF will be created out of the Housing Infrastructure Grant, HIG, as it's known. HIG will fund the transport infrastructure in advance of the development at Gilston Villages. This is the government delivering infrastructure first, which is what residents all around the country call for, so that new development doesn't overwhelm the existing infrastructure. The HIG will fund the transport infrastructure needs, such as enhancements to the existing Stork Crossing, a new Stork Crossing, new roads to serve Gilston, and a new sustainable transport corridor and junction improvements between Gilston and Harlow Town Centre. Although front-funded by the government, the developers will ultimately pay for the transport infrastructure, paying into the RIF, which will then fund the other sustainable transport corridors to be built around the town. This Memorandum of Understanding is the precursor document to administer the RIF. There has been a considerable amount of work gone into this, and I give thanks to all the officers involved, as the path to this has not been easy, and in fact is not over. This has been approved by the HGGT board, and we are the first of the 5 partners to review and approve the document. It does not actually have any legal standing. It is a precursor to a larger, more detailed joint council document, an inter-council agreement which will have legal standing and will move HGGT from its current form to deliver the Garden Town. As I said, this is not over. There are still some minor amendments to happen. Hence, I would like to move an amendment to the report, which is in the papers. Do you want me to read out?
If you would mind, please.
To add in, delegated authority is provided to the Director of Strategic Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the portfolio holder for strategic growth, to agree any minor amendments to the Memorandum of Understanding that arise from the decision-making structures of the other 4 HGGT partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we come to questions and comments, can I just see a seconder to that report, please? Thank you, Councillor Swords. Any questions, please? Councillor Durkin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got about 4 questions, if I may. The first one is in relation to paragraph 5, where it mentions that the crossing, which we assume is the Stork Crossing, that the money has to be spent by 2025. Could the portfolio holder therefore indicate, is that a realistic timescale, and if so, when does he anticipate work commencing?
To answer your final question first, it is all dependent, of course, on planning consent. So I can't really comment on that at the moment. As to whether 2025 is a realistic timetable, I'm assured that it is at the moment.
That's good.
Just on supplementary to that one particular, in light of the fact that it's taken us nearly 30 years to build the bridge that Junction 7A, how optimistic are you that we can build a bridge in 3 years?
I'm assured that we will fulfil the timetable as specified by Housing.
Councillor Durkin, the second question.
Is the next section, which is section 6, which is where we are talking about the monies that are going to be invested. And I am aware that this is not just a new thing, this has been in discussion and disclosure for a number of years over this particular issue. But I was wondering whether or not we could take the opportunity to explain what benefits there will be to current residents of Harlow. You can see and understand the benefits for future populations of Harlow, but as us living in Harlow now, I was just wondering whether or not you could explain what the benefit would be.
Thank you. Well, we're really talking about what the benefits of the Harlow Gilston Garden Town are to Harlow, and they are all pretty much documented. But specifically, I mean, all of the new developments around the town will pay Section 106 monies, most of which will come to Harlow. Unfortunately, I can't be specific because none of the negotiations have been finalised yet, and they are commercially sensitive.
Thank you. The next one is paragraph 7. If I remember correctly, there was a motion that came to full council that was agreed that this council would be opposed to any development on Latin Priory and Water Lane. If so, why is it still in this recommendation as identified in section 7?
Well, as you said, this document has been in preparation probably for 2 or 3 years, I should think. And it is a precursor to a more detailed document, which I'm not looking forward to negotiating because it's even more detailed than this, and this has taken months. Our objection has been given to the inspector. We have not had a response. She hasn't published her final report. So nothing's changed as of yet until we get that report published, which I understand is going to be mid to the end of the month.
And just a supplementary on that one, but wouldn't you agree with me that if this council has made a decision and we have published that decision and we've made it clear to our community about what our position is about it, why are we being asked to agree something that actually we opposed only a short period of time? Surely isn't there an opportunity to make some amendment or highlight in this document the concerns that were expressed by Harlow District Council at its council meeting?
Before you answer, Councillor Harlow, I'd just like to go in. As Councillor Harlow has outlined, this is the memorandum of understanding. It's not a legally binding agreement, and there is natural negotiations to be had in it. But I'm going to allow Councillor Harlow just to follow up on that point.
As I've said, these things have been going on for a considerable time. There are 5 parties, several developers, numerous legal teams involved. Any amendment takes weeks to agree. We know nothing at the moment. As I said, the inspector's report for every drawing has not been published yet. We won't do anything until we see that report.
Mr. Charles.
Sorry, my final question. Sorry, I do apologise.
I'm just going to add,
point.
Sorry.
Councillor Durkin, that you may recall that at the last Cabinet and at full Council, I've answered similar questions around this. And what I would say to you is this: the Council's policy position and then the motion that was agreed at full Council around our position on certain planning matters to the east, south and west. What we believe, even with this document presented before us, is that does not conflict in particular with our links on Broadley Road. And I did stress that at the last full Council, irrespective of these reports that we've got today, our policy position is consistent on that front.
And just to come back, if I may, as that was a second point of clarification, but would you agree with me, Councillor Charles, is that the average person listened, I'm hoping, to the debate and the discussion in relation to our opposition for building in those particular areas? And do you understand, or do you have some empathy that people might then find it odd that as we've agreed that, we're also, or you are actually agreeing a recommendation that actually includes the opposite of what we agreed as the council. It's my last throw on that one.
I will just paraphrase what I said at the last cabinet, that our position around sustainable transport corridors is consistent with the previous administration, and we believe absolutely that our interests around Horley Road do not conflict with that.
Thank you, but this isn't about roads, this is about housing.
No,
And my final question, if I may,
I was
Chair.
going to come in on that point.
Oh, go on.
And just to say, anybody listening in on the debate will have heard Councillor Charles' answer, and so that will help them seek clarity on the issue. So your I believe fifth or sixth question now from your fourth. Please do carry on.
I think, in all fairness to me, all they are most of my questions are in direct response to the response that I've got. They are not my new questions, but my final new question, if I can get on to it, is in section 11. I must admit, Michael, I wasn't entirely sure what this meant, so I was wondering whether or not you could give some clarity to it. And actually, have we got a plan B? Because it sort of indicates that the money may run out. Are we going to be having a half-built new town?
Councillor Harlow.
The problem with the MOU is that it is putting in place a new framework for things which have not been determined yet. None of the Section 106, the Transport Section 106, or the other, Gilston, all the other developments have not. Well, Gilston has been started, but the other ones have not been started. So nothing is quantifiable. The amounts are not quantifiable. Nothing is quantifiable. So all this is doing is put a framework in place as to how it might move forward.
Thank you, Chair.
I had Councillor Leffard indicating for a question.
Not a question, just a suggestion.
We'll come to comments in a moment,
Okay, fine.
Councillor. Are there any other questions on this report that we'll vote on? I see none. So comments, please. Councillor Leffard.
Thank you, Chair. No, I listened with interest to Councillor Durkin's questions, numerous questions. And actually, though, I thought it might be useful just to refer him to the Harlow development plan, which was prepared in depth by his own administration. I think you'll find many of the answers to your questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leffard. Councillor Durkin, I would expect nothing less.
I mean, if somebody quotes me or mentions me, it's only my duty.
That we should not quote you.
Absolutely. I thought you would have learned that quite
Technically,
quickly.
I didn't quote him, I referred to the previous administration.
You did.
I think you did mention me. In all fairness, I think you did mention me by
Your comments, anyway. Your comments.
No, absolutely. And as we know, as the cabinet member is saying, this is a rolling programme. It will hit many bumps in the road as we go along. I do know that we have been working collectively over a number of years to get us to this particular point. When we were in administration and we worked with Andrew and others to absolutely ensure success. And even though we do have our political significant differences about what you've been offered, you've told us, and what we're actually going to get, I think there is mutual interest that we actually work as closely as we possibly can to ensure that the legacy is safe and sustainable as we move forward. So absolutely, regardless of politics, if there is anything that we can do, or if there's anything of an ask from us, then absolutely we would welcome it. We do know, however, there are some very unhappy people in Harlow in relation to the future development of the Stork Crossing, and it's disappointing to note that only 3 of those will be allowed to ask questions or object at that particular time, but we'll see how that evolves. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll sum up before I come back to Councillor Harlow. I'd like to thank Councillor Harlow and the officers for preparing the report. It is on the back of the work that's taken place over many years. I would like to say I see no contradictions in our policies or inconsistencies. I think we've been very consistent throughout. We have said that this is merely a memorandum of understanding. It sets out a framework, a starting point for further discussion and more detailed work, and we have to start somewhere, and this is indeed where we are. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Councillor Harlow if there's anything final to say before I go to the vote.
Just a final point. Having said that it's dealing with undefined amounts, of course the one defined amount is the HEAP funding, which is 171 million, which is forward funding the infrastructure. So that figure is known, but it's the only one that is known. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if I return to the recommendations on page 20, can I, rather than read them all out, can I ask Cabinet that we bear in mind the amendment to the recommendations that Councillor Harlow moved, and with those amendments in mind, can I see agreement on A through to C? All those in favour? Agreed. I suppose I should say all those against as well. None? Okay, thank you. Right, moving on to environment enforcement delivery on pages 40 to 48. Councillor Gunn, I look to you to propose the paper.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to bring this report to Cabinet tonight. Littering and flight have been blights to our town and are at unacceptably high levels. It's a key aim of this administration to tidy up our town, and this report forms an important part of our approach to that challenge. It is right, given how much Harlow taxpayers spend on trying to keep our streets clean, that we do seek to enforce the laws on this, including by issuing fines for those who act with so little regard for the town and communities in which they and we all live, and the environmental harms that so much littering can cause. I therefore hope Cabinet and your position will join in supporting this report and its proposal to tender for additional enforcement capacity from next year, so that we can continue to fight to tidy up Harlow and restore pride in our town. However, I must address a problem that I've been grappling with since day one in this role, and where I believe this report charts up a better way forward. As fellow councillors will be aware, since last summer, under the previous administration, a company called NES was contracted on a trial basis to supplement the council's own limited resources to tackle growing levels of littering. And in many ways, this approach has worked, but it has, I believe, become quite clear that under the current arrangements, we have seen some Harlow residents unfairly targeted in some instances. Several cases I've heard of, whilst in line with the law and what the council had agreed with NES, were clearly disproportionate. One case from my own ward, Staple Ties, sticks with me, of a single mother with no record of previous littering offences, fined £200 for a minor and entirely inadvertent offence. And I know other councillors have had some similar cases, indeed some brought them to my attention, for which I'm grateful. This approach has done nothing to help that down. Genuine littering, organised fly tipping, all where necessary, help to educate people about the impact their actions might have on the cleanliness of our town and in keeping our estates tidy. And worse, these types of fines have undermined confidence in the council's enforcement approach when we need to build support for a litter-free Harlow. And I know the frustration about this is felt on both sides, and every councillor, as I say, sitting in this chamber today will have come across similar cases in their own ward. And again, thank you for raising it with me. From day one in this role, I felt it was unacceptable that under the arrangements we inherited, this council was targeting our residents in their homes and in effect treating them worse than the criminal fly tippers in those businesses, clogging up our grass verges with A-boards and estate agent signs, fixing them to whatever they can. This report charts a better way forward by proposing a modified specification of the enforcement contract, keeping our ability to enforce fines for real littering, but moving the focus away from catching out well-meaning residents and towards those dumping rubbish around our town. And I'm pleased to confirm my excellent team of officers have secured an agreement with NES that will see them change their approach as of now to reflect this, bringing an immediate end to the disproportionate and counterproductive fines that were being imposed on Harlow residents. I must end my comments by paying tribute to the Harlow Wombles and their efforts to try and turn the tide. I had the pleasure of meeting up with several of them on Monday, alongside HTS, who kindly donated several litter pickers to the group recently. and also to thank fellow councillors who engage in this picking in their spare time. For example, for the Harlow Spring Clean, I do follow your Twitter exploits, Councillor Vince, with admiration and inspiration. We all want to see a cleaner Harlow, and so I thank all of those inside this chamber and out who are working to help us achieve that. I welcome this report and hope that it will receive support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm looking for a second, I believe, Councillor Harlow is a second. Okay, so can I take questions, please? I will go to Councillor Vince, then Councillor Davis, and Councillor Michael in that order. Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair. I probably guess I was going to ask questions on this one, and I welcome the report, and I take a lot of the things you said. I mean, first question, point 12, page 42, is about body cameras being worn. I'm assuming they weren't worn in the pilot study. This is a new idea, is it, Councillor?
Councillor
I don't believe they work. I'm not 100% sure, so I will seek to double check on that point if that's okay.
You have further questions?
Yeah, so I've got 5, but they're very quick ones like that.
Let's see.
Yeah, point 13, seats going permission went to the private provider. Is this intended to continue, or are we hoping that there'll be sort of be more money going to the council?
Sorry, can you put that again?
In the pilot study, the receipts were going to the private provider as part of the agreement. What's the kind of agreement moving forward in terms of where the money from the fines is going to go?
Councillor, would you like me to take that question? You have to say.
No, I'm happy to take that. That is addressed elsewhere in the report. It is something that would be explored. The pilot was with all the costs borne by NES and no revenue to come to the council. That was what was agreed back in, well, it only came into effect in August 2020. That's something that is addressed elsewhere in the report.
Yeah, again, apologies, this is covered. I did try and read the report, but I may have missed that bit, so apologies for that. You mentioned it briefly in your initial statement. I had a similar story to yours. A young gentleman who actually had no difficulty in his care was telling him to pick up a litter and he didn't. And so that's obviously not good at all. What is been put in place to ensure there isn't sort of overzealous officers, and is pay for officers performance related, or are they on fixed salary?
As the report extends to the pilot, there's been no performance-related pay, salaried, and that's an approach that I believe we'd be looking to carry forward. So actually, we're looking to go out to tender from March next year, and nothing has been signed off. But I would be wary of going down that road. There are opportunities to challenge appropriate fines, but if there are vulnerable residents being targeted, that's clearly something where we would want to have a good relationship with whoever gets this contract to be able to introduce compassion and sensitivity to difficult cases. And to their credit, NES have begun, to my mind, to show that approach.
Last one, so really quick. So concern was just about how the council monitors this going forward, and can you clarify what you foresee monitoring? It does mention monitoring moving forward, but I just wondered if you could give us a bit more detail in terms of what this looks like moving forward.
Could you clarify what elements of it which elements of monitoring you're on? There's lots one could monitor.
I just want to know, in a 6-month or year period, what you're going to be asking of the company, and what you're going to look at in terms of what is the success for this, this moving forward, really. I mean, success isn't how many people you catch, is it? It's about it's about obviously, it's about our talent be better. But I mean, I just wondered, and I'm not saying I've got the answer that the cat have done, so I don't expect to have every answer. Don't worry. But it was just, what do you think? How are you going to measure success, really?
It's a good question. It is one where I think I would welcome any detailed thoughts that the Council of Vince or other opposition councillors or other council members have on this. We do at officer level get pretty detailed information about NES activities. So my understanding is the monitoring is not effective in real time. It is pretty regular. The report does propose to look for an extension of this type of contract for 3 years, so there'll be a 3-year contract, which perhaps to some extent answers when it will be reviewed in that sense. But monitoring, I think, does have to be continuous, and we do get some pretty good data about how they go about that. And just to reiterate and to support what Councillor Vince has said, the aim here is not to go out and make lots of money on the back of Harlow residents. The aim is to clamp down on fly tipping, on littering, and tidy up Harlow.
Thank you, Councillor Vince. Are you finished with your questions? Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Bob Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome some of the remarks made by Councillor Gunn. I'm not the only one that's been given him hassle, apparently, so that's pretty good. I've written some notes down, so I'd just like to go through them very briefly, Chair. The previous administration introduced this system, as I understand it. I had words, or quite a few words, with the previous portfolio holder when I started receiving complaints from residents and found out there was no appeal procedure. The only way to appeal a fine was to go to a magistrate's court. I don't think we've got one in Harlow, so you probably have to go to Chelmsford or somewhere else. The report in section 20 states that residents often do not understand they may be liable, so I think we need to engage that with people and tell them what they're supposed to do and what they can't do.
Councillor Davis, sorry to interrupt you, but on your first note, I suppose is your question, because I'm happy to take comments later on, but is your question, will there be some kind of a process?
Yes.
Should we take that question and then maybe come to your other notes as we go through, so we're getting some sort of question going? Bob, is that okay?
Well, yeah, okay.
Is that a fair point?
Well, I've nearly finished, but never mind.
Go on, Karen.
What I'll be asking for is for an appeal process. Can we do that? For example, can the fines be overridden by the portfolio holder if, for example, the councillor provides reasons for doing so? Because I'm concerned that there's no appeal procedure. So that's basically what I was after, Chair.
On the point on the appeal procedure, it's certainly something that I'd be happy to see explored. On the specific point around can a particular portfolio holder override a particular fine, for example, I think I feel more comfortable in consulting with the legal officer over delegated powers and coming back at a future time with a more definitive answer on that, if I may, Councillor Davis. But I certainly take the point on board.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
I'm going to move to Councillor Garnett, if I may.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this report actually, because it seems to take a softening of the line that's been going on. Councillor Gowland knows I've been on to about 3 or 4 cases in Old Harlow, which I find were completely unjustified and completely disproportionate to what's going on. So my question really is about, is there any, because the fine is £200, so if you leave a plastic bag of rubbish outside your front garden, you get fined £200. I just find it's, with the, the vulnerable people here, the people who are struggling, they can't afford it. Thankfully, the 3 of the 4 I got, the NES decided to rescind it in the end when they heard the evidence. But I think also the wardens were a bit brusque about it. They were taking photos. You talked about they had actually had a camera, I understand. At least on one occasion, I believe that the warden was lying the way it came about. The story he was telling as to why he went to the knock on this door. So anyway, having said that, is there any way we can mitigate that £200 fine to be more realistic to what's going on?
Entirely content, Chair, if you're happy. First of all, I've got to say thank you to both councillors, Garnett and Davis, who have been assiduous in supporting their residents in both cases, and I'm delighted, Mike, to know that you've had some success with those. And I think with Councillor Davis, we've had a recent softening as well on a particular case that I'm confirmed. Yes, one of the problems is that the cases you've been referring to is precisely what the report seeks to address. of people being fined for leaving very close to their property and not in any intention to litter or fly tip. You do get a £200 fine for fly tipping, where there are lesser fines for littering. So they are effectively being treated worse under the old system than people who, let's say, discarded drinks container in the town centre, for example. We have, and I pay credit to the team of officers who've been working on this for achieving this, but also to NES. We have seen them adapt and understand what this new administration is after, and I think that's reflected in the successes that you've had. Clearly, with any enforcement like this, having photographic evidence is going to be a part of the job, so I think that's probably something that one has to welcome, broadly speaking.
Chairman, can I just say one more thing, which you said at the time? There are litter pickers around the town. Councillor Charles and I have been doing it for over 3 years in Old Harlow and Churchgate Street, all around that area. So we've not got the publicity that one or two of the other groups have got, because they've started it much later. Hopefully we were the beginning of sorting it out, so it's good. And there's quite a number actually of people in Old Harlow now that do go up and down the riverbanks, etc. So thank you, Chair, for letting me say that.
Well, thank you, Councillor Carney. You almost gracefully took us into comments, but I'm cognizant that Councillor Harvey may have a question. If there's a question, Councillor Harvey, I'll entertain it. If it's a comment, I'd just like to double check that there aren't any more questions before I move on. Councillor Harvey.
I shall do my best to entertain you, Councillor Perrin. So my question, I guess, has a kind of dimension of a comment to it as well. I was really surprised to see over 4,000, I think, fines for discarding cigarette butts. And, not being a smoker, perhaps it's not surprising that I don't know this, but would people really know that you could be fined for discarding a cigarette butt? I mean, I suppose if you're a smoker, you do, but I certainly was surprised by that. And it just struck me that probably we could do with some communications around what are prohibited behaviours. Again, forgive me if people do know this, and I'm just a bit naive, but I think a communications campaign is quite an important dimension to this. And I suppose my question is, as we move into phase 2 of the programme, is that something that you're considering? And can I follow up after this question?
Of course, Councillor.
Thank you. And this actually speaks to the point that Councillor Davis made that I wanted to come back to as well, about education. And I refer you to recommendation C on the first page of the report, that the Council will engage in communications measures to enhance the effect of enforcement. So this is a central part of the work that we have to do, is to educate people. I should say, if you're on the Harlow moaning page on Facebook, you'll be well aware that people did issue fines for cigarettes, and I'm an ex-smoker, so perhaps have a better insight into some of the challenges around this, but I think it's the biggest source of plastic pollution in the oceans, frankly anywhere, are cigarette butts. We don't think it was plastic, but that's they've got all sorts in them. So yes, education is key. And to reiterate what I said to Councillor Vince, agreeing with Councillor Vince earlier, the aim here is not to issue lots and lots of fines and make lots of money. It is to get Harlow tidy, and tackling cigarette butts is the biggest form of littering that we face.
May I follow up with a question?
Yes, please.
Thanks. I value my mental health far too much to be on Harlow moaning page. But I admire anybody who has the strength for it. I wanted to say, perhaps this is a comment, but I will make it a question. I wanted to say how much I enjoyed the tenor of the discussion we just had and how productive it was, and I think this is a really positive thing, for want of a better word. And I just wanted to say that what hasn't worked optimally, I think we're all in agreement, was a pilot, and we're going to learn from that. So I just wanted to, I suppose, just suggest that we don't couch this in terms of a flawed system that was inherited, but rather a learning process that I think we all share a lot of views on, and will actually really strengthen the town going forward. So I don't think that's a question. I could say, do you agree with that to make it such? Perhaps in truth it's more of a comment.
Well, do you agree?
Well, I found the situation as it is, and I'd like to think we're improving the situation, but I certainly welcome support for these measures, just what I'm hearing today, so thank you very much for that.
Okay, so
Sorry, one more question.
we
These
seem
questions.
to be fleeing between question and comment. We're going to have to become a little more disciplined. So, question, fine. Then we'll move to comment. So, question, please.
I can do it in either way, but it's just to say, it occurred to me that the revenue we generate from the fines, I believe it's 50% is coming from the, no, going forward, we're going to do, I thought we were doing this split of 50% on in the next, I did think that the council was going to earn some income from the system going forward. That was what my understanding was from Andrew when he spoke to me about it. If I'm wrong, this is a silly suggestion. My thought was that if that is the case, might we do something like use that money, designate that money towards something positive for the town, so we could have some kind of, use that to represent the value that we're able to generate from this process and create something positive and circular.
So, as Councillor Gunn has outlined already, there is going to be a tender process. Well, there is a tender process underway. Part of that tender process will be looking at any potential income this council may derive from it. And I'd like to finish by saying all things this council do are of benefit to this town, and I think I'll leave that where I may. Are there any further questions? Okay, let's go to comments. Any comments from councillors? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. I think I may have to declare a peculiar interest because I have in fact been issued an FPN for dropping this on private property, which came as something of a surprise until the was pointed out that the Environment Protection Act actually refers to open spaces regardless of ownership. Which brings me nicely on to my main point, in that most of these FPNs are contrary to Section 87 or whatever of the Environment Protection Act, and therefore they are legal fines, and the council has no ability whatsoever to vary them. Clearly, what we need to do is to press down on, I won't say sort of compassion, but a bit more understanding of actual circumstances, rather than having people standing around Tesco's car park waiting for people to drop cigarette ends, which is what they do.
Any further comment? We'll go to Councillor Vince and Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, David agreed with Councillor Carter there. I mean, yeah, ultimately we agree. I think as part of this issue, flooding and nitpicking is a huge issue. I mean, I'm not going to who started nitpicking first, but I mean, if we want to make a competition out of it, that can only be good for Harlow, can't it? To be honest, do you know what I mean? So I think that's a great thing. Ultimately, this is a pilot scheme, and it is, as such, it does need ironing out. And I think that it's good that we are all in agreement in terms of how we actually iron that out. And as Councillor Gunn says, Councillor Davis on our side, and Councillor Carson on your side have been very proactive in this respect, so that's brilliant. I think there is a need for appeals process, which Councillor Davis has touched upon, and just to finish, really, to agree again with Councillor Carson, I think it's just about a need for human touch, isn't it, on this, and I've not felt full foul of this yet, but I do know people who have, it's communication first, isn't it? Give them warning first, but ultimately, this is a big issue that we do need to tackle, and I think it's like I once told a kid off for ripping a bit of my wall display. He said, "Oh, it's just a bit of wall display. Why does it matter?" I'm talking about transparent data because the minute you damage something, even that little bit, it's enough for people to not care about it anymore. And there's a phrase, and I can't remember the phrases, but it's broken window syndrome. Is that it? Thank you. So actually, it's something that may seem small to a lot of people, but does make a big difference to our community. So I welcome this report as I just do.
I've never told a child before. Councillor Edwards.
Just picking up on the point that Councillor Harlow was making, I think it's about, I do welcome the report. I think it's about turning it all into a virtuous circle, isn't it? So there's the work that's going on, the very good work that one was doing, the work that this will be doing in terms of saying to people, look, if you do drop litter, etc., you will, there's the possibility that you'll be fined over it, unwillingly. But there's also the other bit of it is about celebrating as things improve. It's about celebrating those improvements and pointing out this is what the area looked like once, this is what the area is looking like now. And I think the point that Councillor Harlow was making to see whether or not, if there is some income generated for this, if it can be in some way seen to be going back into the same area and creating that virtuous circle, I think that would be helpful. But all I would say is well done in terms of the people that have been involved in this report. Well done to them, and I look forward to seeing over the next couple of years this policy rolling forward.
Any further comments? We've got Councillor Leppard and Councillor David Carter. So we've got Councillor Leppard.
Just one observation on the fine levels. I noticed that cigarettes, dropping a cigarette butt is £80.
Sorry, Chair. Put a mic on.
Sorry. My apologies. I noticed that the dropping of a cigarette raises a fine of £80, whereas dog fouling is 50. I think that's probably should be reversed the other way around. Yeah. And if anyone thinks otherwise, I would just ask any council, what should you prefer to tread on? Thank you.
Councillor David Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I welcome this report as well. I'm a huge fan of litter picking. One of the problems I have with litter picking is that I do go out on Sundays, litter picking, and I often get approached by adults with children, and the adult wants to help and the children do, and I'm terrified with the children wanting to help, because with the state that we're in at the moment, with children picking up anything from broken glass to needles, etc., I don't want them to do this, but at the same time I want to encourage them to be good citizens, not drop litter, and help. How can we actually, or can we put in some sort of provision that children can help in a safe way? Thank you.
Before I don't see anyone else indicating, so before I sum up, I'm going to ask Councillor Bennett if there's anything further he wishes to say before I do so.
Merely to thank councillors for their very helpful contributions and comments, some which I think will be good for us, for officers and portfolio holders to reflect on and see if we can inform this going forward. But very pleased with the response.
Okay. Well, I too have found this a very interesting debate, and I also agree. I've welcomed the tenure today. It's been quite refreshing. I agree with the idea of the appeals process. I like that idea. I think that's a good point. I also agree with Councillor Dunn. We're dealing with what we find, and hearing some of the stories that all councillors have heard about fines being issued in an unfeeling or uncaring or just illogical way needs to be addressed, and I'm glad we're taking steps to address that. So that's absolutely fantastic, and this is one of those few examples where I said we're quite happy, we're working constructively with the opposition, because when there are good ideas, we're taking them forward. And I know many people are very keen on litter picking. I'm also keen that there's a preventative element to this, because actually, why should anyone have to pick up somebody else's litter? And this is a very expensive process, but what this does do is tips the balance back against the people that do these kinds of horrible acts against our society and where we live. And I like the emphasis being placed upon the criminal element, the fly tippers, the people that really take advantage of our society and our environment, and can cause great damage to our environment, because waste not dealt with properly is a major harm. I feel sorry for Councillor Carter, Simon Carter, for having been fined on private property. It's disgraceful. That said, I applaud Mrs. Carter for her very wonderful and very innovative efforts to prize money from his wallet. So, well done to Mrs. Carter for that. All that said, I'm going to move to the vote on the recommendations. You give me a kick afterwards, Simon. Okay, final page number, page 20. So, page 4. So, move to the vote that Cabinet recommends, and I'll take items A through to C on block. All those in favour? Agreed. All those against? Yes, unanimously carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's move on now to item 11 on pages 49 to 145, tree planting and biodiversity management. Again, I look to you, Councillor Dunn, to move this paper.
Thank you again, Chair. I do like to have my reports coming in twos, it seems, and having managed to find the EV report for World EV Day, I missed this one time very shortly after COP26, commitments to end and reverse deforestation, this report on tree planting and biodiversity, serendipity is my middle name. I've said in the past that in many ways what I've sought to achieve as a portfolio model for environment is building on what the previous administration achieved and where possible going further. So in the spirit of recognising where there's cross-party agreement, let me begin by again recognising the party opposite for having sought to plant large numbers of trees in Harlow and having initiated the planting of wildflower strips which bloom so beautifully past summer and brighten the town. And I'm pleased to confirm that we will be doubling the number of wildflower strips and that we have secured funding through the government's local authority treescape fund for a winter tree planting programme. And as a result, every ward in Harlow will see new trees planted, with 3 large planting sites and 40 already mature trees to be planted elsewhere across the town. And we'll be planting a sweet gum in larkswood, limes in great plum tree, a fascination birch behind Barley Croft, and in little Parsden and Hare Street, I hope the councillors Duncan and Vince will enjoy the red maple October glory that we'll be planting in Rycroft. I suppose some of us may be trying to get a blue blossoming May glory as well. So alongside tree planting work in Pondwood and the Town Park, and I must congratulate volunteers at both for their Green Flag Awards and at Harlow Museum as well. We will be planting over 2,000 trees this year, and I'll be coming back to that number later on. Where this report aims to go further is in recognising that despite these efforts and good intentions, there is still a long way to go on better managing Harlow's green assets and Sir Frederick Gibbert's great green legacy, which we all enjoy today. This report sets out our intention to develop both a long-term tree planting target over the coming months, and informed by work by the Woodland Trust, who I've been pleased to speak to about this, and to set out a strategic approach to how we manage and improve biodiversity in the town. We are considering this report against the backdrop of COP26 and the challenge of climate change, but must also not lose sight of the fact that we're also going through the 6th mass extinction event, something from which Harlow is not immune. And I know I'm not alone in being concerned about the impact potential future developments around Harlow could have on our already stressed natural environment. Harlow should aspire to play its own role in addressing biodiversity loss through our own policies and the decisions that are made in this chamber. The report makes reference to the government's landmark environment bill and its targets for improving biodiversity, and my cabinet colleague, the portfolio holder for strategic growth, will have more to say to this at next month's cabinet through the open spaces document. So we should look to understand fully what the picture is here in Harlow and how we can play our part on biodiversity. To come back to that point about numbers, to preempt questions that may be asked about it, some may question why we're planting 2,000 trees versus, say, 5,000. And one of the most significant elements of the funding that we have secured is that it covers 3 years of maintenance costs and has a survival target of 75%. We heard the opposition, of course, last week for council talk about the survival target for their 5,000 trees, which was, as I understand it, 30%. A target that has been met just about after intensive emergency works to the plantation site at Pear Tree Mead. So overall, it is therefore likely that of the trees planted this winter, approximately the same number will survive as compared to the 5,000 that were planted, the vast majority of which unfortunately have not survived. So on that note, I do welcome this report and the carefully planned steps it sets out to make Harlow greener and more biodiverse. Thank you, Chair.
Before we go to questions, can I see a seconder for this report? Thank you, Councillor Swords. Questions? Councillor Durkin, then Councillor Guinness.
Sorry, I have two questions, if I may, and I'm struggling to find it in the report. We have a number of small forests in and around Harlow, and I'm particularly referring to Latin Common Forest, which unfortunately has been left over a number of years. Now, I am aware that we used to use volunteers to clear some of the pathways, but it is an environmental area where we do have wild deer, and also we have a lot of dog walkers who do pick up their poo. I was just wondering, could you identify whether or not these sorts of woods would be included? And my second question was that the former leader of the council, Mark Ingle, was very interested in hedgerows as well as developing trees. There was an initiative to try to develop hedges, which again, that helps small wildlife, birds, insects, etc. And I was wondering whether or not that was part of the initiative as well. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. I think there's a comprehensive list of all the areas that are under active management under the Woodland Management Appendix. If Latin Forest isn't in there, then that would suggest it isn't being maintained. And that is something that I'll wish to explore further with officers. There are other sites, Councillor David Carter's raised the Jeep Alpine Park, for example, where, as I say in the comments I've made, there's a lot more that one needs to do. There are lots of sites where one would hope to do more to manage those sites. Hedges isn't something that's considered in this report, but it is an important point. I'd be more than happy to engage with that point, and of course through HTS as well, who have an important role to maintain our hedges.
Thank you, Councillor Van. Councillor Durkin, are you finished with your questions?
Oh yeah.
Don't
encourage me.
Councillor Vince there. And then I'll come to Councillor David.
You've got too much.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, interesting, the point you made about obviously the tradition 30% success rate in planting trees, and this is not just I made that number up, it's come from the experts, but I just wondered, out of interest, and I'll read a bit about 75% with really just genuinely interest. Do you know kind of how they're going to ensure that there's going to be such a success rate of trees? Because talking to experts on this, 30% is quite normal when you're planting a large amount of trees.
Indeed, Councillor
Thank you. I don't think 30% is, the conversations I've had with officers don't reflect that 30% is the target we aim for. I mean, we should understand that 5,000 trees were planted. There were some significant challenges. The pandemic, obviously, the weather was challenging. The site at East Park, which we're going to revisit, there's been a lot of lessons learned about the site and the way in which it was planted, and the survival rate there is at or around 10% survival rate, which is clearly very low. There are steps that have been identified that should make a significant difference when we revisit that site. But the funding is there to maintain, to do the maintenance work. If you plant an immature whip, and lots of them, some will die. A good success rate is around that 70 to 80%. That is where, with active management, you should be aiming for. The funding that we've secured from the local authority fund aims for that because it's achievable. By going out there and doing the management of these sites with that funding, that is an entirely achievable target, and indeed at Pear Tree Mead, where that approach does seem to have been favoured, that is approximately, I don't know the exact survival rate there, but I think it is ballpark 70-75%. So we've shown that we can do it in Harlow if we put our minds to it and maintain these sites, rather than just planting them and leaving them.
Councillor Vince, do you have a supplementary?
I think just moved 30% of 5,000 to the same 75% of 2,000. I thought that was the right figures. So just in terms of protection of trees, and I did mention at the last, sorry, I've got to get the maths in, at the last council meeting there was an issue with some of the trees in Sanders, and I know Andrew's not here to answer the question. I know Andrew has dealt with that problem. I know HS have responded, so I'm not going to cast that. But I just thought moving forward, and there is a mention in page 54 about not using plastic guards and trying to move towards something that's more environment friendly, which obviously we all support. Is there any plans to look at fencing around trees as well and that sort of thing, just to ensure that we don't have any issues? Obviously that was a one-off issue that I recognise that won't happen again, I'm sure, but there are plenty of other ways that immature trees can get damaged that we might look at.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you. For the benefit of other councillors, there was an incident at the site in Summers where HTS are planting, I believe, another 200 trees to make good and go beyond any damage that has been caused. And I have to commend them on having taken that step. Yes. It's not that I say it's instant. Actually, I think there was a problem at Pear Tree Mead, not a council employee, but it's a fair point well made. There are some fencing posts knocking around Pond Wood from the Babaciosis site. Not sure how much support I get for saying I want to see them all over Sanders Wall, but that is something that may need to be considered depending on the locations. Although I think you do well to get a large vehicle to some of the sites that are being considered that are going to be hosting these sites, so hopefully it won't be necessary.
Just got two more, Chair. Again, I appreciate it's probably not an ancient woodland, although it does seem pretty good to walk through it every morning. But there's no mention of rectory wood on this particular report, and there's some that lives in this my ward and I walk through it every day. I am concerned about it, its upkeep, particularly some of the trees we've got that are going to come down, and I won't go into the history of it, but just wonder if this is going to be considered as well, because it just wasn't in the report, that was all.
Well, I apologise if specific woods, there are plenty of them around how they have been missed. I'm sure it's unintentional. If any councillor, and I say this to Councillor Vince, but to any councillor in this chamber or not attending today has a concern about the way in which green spaces are managed in there, well, please do raise them with me and with the responsible officers. We do have some very dedicated officers who work very hard on these matters, as I believe Councillor Vince knows and knows personally. So I'm sure that they're very keen to engage on rectory wood and any other wood that any councillor has a concern about.
I appreciate that, and you keep my great offering that, and it would be great if I could get to have a conversation with you about that, would be brilliant. Last question for me was, and I'm looking at Councillor Charles, because I know him and the late great Councillor Mason really bonded over this, but there was a real push to do more. We really pushed to make it into community activity behind the trees. As I say, councils came along, we had the scouts along, we had family carers, all these sort of groups come along to do it. I guess the answer to this question is yes, but just to remain it with you. But I'm hoping that you're going to say yes, that this is really something that you're going to do moving forward with the next sort of tranche of planting.
Councillor Dunn.
The report makes clear the importance of volunteering to do this work.
Brilliant. I'm sorry, what just regards to what's going to read, but didn't associate, please forgive me, it was about the youth council as well, because they were doing planting an open pond before it became popular, so just to involve them as well. I didn't see them mentioned, that was all.
I think youth councillors, anybody can be considered able to volunteer. So I hear that. I hear it. We could be here a long time and we start listening to various groups. So everyone's welcome to volunteer. All welcome. Take a tree each. Okay. Are there any more? Oh yes, Councillor David Carter. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. One of the items on this, on the grass lake, is Hawkenbury Meadow. Now, Hawkenbury Meadow, in the last couple of weeks in October, has been totally refurbished. The trees have been cut, the grass has been cut. It's a real pleasure to go down to Hawkenbury Meadow and walk round there. However, it's a bit late for this year. It's October, it's been cut down, they've done a beautiful job, but people are not going to use it there because it will become muddy and in the winter. During the earlier months, May, June, July, August, it was overrun, bushes all over the place, grass 5-6 feet high, absolutely unusual. What I would like to ask is that this will change around and maybe be looked at early in the year so people from Hawkenbury and the surrounding areas can use it during the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor can answer that question. It's certainly a focus of this administration to ensure that our environment across Harlow is tip-top and that we get on things when we're able to within the legislation, because as you're well aware, certain things can't be cut back, hedges for particular in the summer, but where we can, we are going to get on it, and it's a major focus for this administration. I'm going to go to Councillor Gunn.
There's no need to come to me because Chair, you said everything needs to be said on the floor.
Any further questions before we come to comments? I think I'm going to go to Councillor Edwards because I have a feeling Councillor Guy will allow us to move into comment. Councillor Edwards.
This is a question. Page 64, in the Appendix C, where it's talking about grassland management. In the ultimate paragraph, it says, currently the Council does not manage grassland areas in a traditional manner, which would have the most significant positive impact on biodiversity, largely because of the cost implications of this. Do we have any understanding of what the cost implications are, and has there been any sort of cost-benefit analysis done? That's just a statement. I don't know whether it would be a relatively small amount of money to address this, or whether we're talking about a huge amount of money.
Yes, no.
I'm not aware of any specific costs that have been given on that. It's not something that this administration has as yet looked at. I assume this comment may reflect officers having looked at it previously, but I don't know.
Come back with a follow-on question. My question obviously is going to be, well, can officers be asked to look at this and give a figure as to what that, you know, what the cost implications are behind that statement?
That is something that I will take away with officers.
Councillor Kite.
Thank you, Chairman. It is a question, actually. Under paragraph 17, which is part of the Old Gloucester Woodland, Ancient Woodlands, it talks about incomes, and it talks about, on C, it says creation of sustainable woodland produce such as firewood and charcoal. Is charcoal good to produce? It's not CO2?
Well, this must have escaped my net zero review from a couple of months ago. I don't think that the amount of charcoal that's being produced is substantial on wood, and they do a great deal more for the environment, I think, that is positive than any negative output. So I commend them on their initiatives.
And if I may, because ancient woodland is actually managed woodland, any effects of material produced typically in this nature are net zero. So we can see any comments now? Lots of comments. Right, let's go with Councillor Durkin, and then with a big delay, so I'll have to come back short.
Thank you, Chair. I can't believe anybody wouldn't welcome this particular report, and I do know that a former councillor who may well be looking down on us down in Purton will be very proud, as this is part of his legacy for Harlow. I do welcome the initiative and the continuing initiative about wildflower planting, because I know myself and Shona Johnson had been campaigning for this for a number of years, and it took us a long time just to get to the pilot, so I'm absolutely delighted over those particular issues. I absolutely would share the congratulations that we need to give to the hundreds of volunteers that show more care to Harlow than perhaps others do. And again, it reflects very much to the criticism that the Cabinet Member for Regeneration made a few meetings ago, where he was very critical of Harlow when he said out of every window there was misery and despair. well, I don't know what window he looks out of, but actually when you do look around the green areas, the tree areas, the planting, I believe Harlow is half full rather than half empty. And my final comment is I also believe in the nature reserve. A special thanks should also go to the charity ECO from the Folan family, who have worked tirelessly over many, many years, very quietly, with great diligence, to build up a charity, not only about recycling, to change that, but actually put in their charity resources into things that matter, which is pond and wood and other areas. So absolutely. My final point would be, it's a bit like Latin Wood. It's actually also we need to work much closer with our partners, Epping Forest and East Herts, because there's nothing worse than if a person is travelling into Harlow and sees something, that's the immediate impression that they get from Harlow, about Harlow. But actually, if we have got green, sustainable planting, hedges, wildflowers, that actually makes people know that they want to live, they want to play, and they want to invest in Harlow as well. Thank you for allowing me to make those comments.
Councillor David Carter, you were speaking.
Thank you, Chair. I think we are very privileged to live in Harlow, with the trees all around the town, the roads that we drive down, covered in trees, bushes, grass verges, often large grass verges. And I believe this helps our lifestyle and well-being from an oxygen point of view, which people in areas like London unfortunately don't have. And what I would like to say regarding the grasslands, some of the grasslands around town, they were cut too late this year. When I say cut too late, they were cut in May. First cuts of them were in May. There was no cutting of those grasslands early on. Now, we don't take the grass away, we let the grass recycle itself. But if you cut it when it's 1 foot 6 inches, 1 foot 6 inches long, it becomes thatch and it lays on the ground, and when the cutters come again, they just churn it up a bit more, and it becomes not able to be played or worked on, etc. If you cut it when it's small, it biodegrades into the ground and then replenishes itself through that system. So I'm hoping that we won't go back to starting the grass cutting in May, but we will do it at the first opportunities in March, like we did prior to last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. I'm going to have Councillor Vince and Councillor Simon Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments very quickly. The first one is a little bit political, apologies, but page 54, it's nice to see a mention about getting rid of single-use plastic, something the last administration did achieve in response to the climate change emergency. There was some suggestion we didn't do anything, which is not true. That's the only bit I'm going to say. I will again reiterate, the massive amount of volunteers that came out, and I did want to particularly mention Harlow Youth Council again because they were hugely involved in it, in planting those trees. And I think actually it was just a really, really good community activity. And I make the joke, but it was good to see councillors from different sides of the chamber working together to achieve something, and it was quite nice. It was nice to see, put it that way. I have spoken to people about planting, and actually the 30% take-up rate actually isn't as bad as people suggest. However, I do welcome anything that council officers can do to increase the take-up rate, which is why I'm really interested and did ask that question. And again, I will say this. I did mention Rectory Wood specifically, and I appreciate that you can't mention every woodland in Harlow, but ultimately, as before we are anything else, before I'm leading the Labour group, for you guys as portfolio holders, the first thing we are ward councillors, aren't we? So as a ward councillor, I'm clearly going to ask questions about my ward and the woodland in my ward, and I do, Jamie, I'm not trying to catch you up here at Tour Council, I'm really not, but I really thank you for your answers, and I really welcome, what I perceive as being a very genuine offer to engage me on that particular woodland and have some sort of dialogue on it, because I am concerned about it, and ultimately when it comes to trees, if you leave an issue, it gets bigger because it grows, doesn't it? So I welcome having sort of further conversation with you on that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Simon Carter.
Thank you, Chair. I found the whole playground fascinating, really interesting, and a joy to read. Particularly Appendix E, Harlow Nature Reserve. I mean, the amount of stuff that's going on up there. There's the Alaskan chainsaw mill. The two are being cut down to the slow downs. And the special way in which they make charcoal, which are environmentally friendly because they don't release the air and smoke out the gases they use to burn it to sugar. Sustainable woodland produce firewood and charcoal. In a retort, fire does not come into contact with the wood as it is sealed in the chamber, so the air cannot come into contact with it, which reduces pollution by about 75%. So even that is being addressed. We often talk about jewels in our crown. Part of the wood is clearly one of those. There's so much activity going on there, so much positive activity. There's been reference to the volunteers who do a tremendous amount of there, and there's also the green team. So it's a great report, being able to set out all that is going on. Hopefully there will be plans for the other woods that have been mentioned to tonight. I know there are a number of appendices which are not actually present in the report. You need to click on links to actually find that. There may well be something in there. But perhaps Councillor Gove find the time, or get one of the volunteers perhaps to find the time to find out the master plans for the other woods in Harlow. I think we will all appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, would you indicate? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I was going to say much of what Simon just said, which is I found reading the Cabinet papers when I came across these 90 pages of reports and information about, it was like an oasis. It was joyous in the context of Cabinet papers, and such a delight and such a surprise. And I really want to give a shout out, and I'm sure I'll have a lot of support for this, for Patrick Bailey, who is the officer, who is just such a good egg, who is behind so much of this. And I just think it's nice to reflect on the sort of two sides of the coin that we've had in the last two items. We had the litter picking and the enforcement and the kind of, and we have the glory and the joy of this item. And honestly, I just really want to say, just put a smile on my face as I've sat down to read the papers to find this oasis. So I fully endorse the report, and I'm so pleased to have had the chance to talk about it in the chamber.
I'm going to go to Councillor Swords, and I'll move to Councillor Balfour. His comments before I finally sum up, as I've had no other indicators to speak. Councillor Swords.
Much like thunder has already been stolen by Councillor Carter and Councillor Harlow, because it's probably, let's say this lightly, one of the best reports I've read since being a member of council, because it is, to see some of the truly incredible stuff that's going on. It's very heartening, and I've seen, you won't hear me too often in this chamber commend Mr. Rindle, but one of the fantastic things he did, that you can see in Pear Tree Mead, and at the side of Longfield, the tree planting that survived, which adds great value to the area. And it, as I said, truly fantastic report. I of course couldn't let Councillor Durkin get away with the slide gig, because I let into a secret that after...
Oh, it wasn't slide?
Never is with you. After every council meeting, I then some poor folk does transcribe what I say. Because when I leave this chamber, I forget most of it, and I have to ensure that I'm accountable for what I've said. And I've just checked those since being a member. I've never used the word misery nor despair in this chamber, so perhaps his accuracy needs a bit of work. If you're a bit more accurate in this role, you may have had some more success, because the only misery I've probably seen sits over there. And there's certainly no misery or despair in this report, so I strongly commend it.
Or it may be that you can't remember what you say.
Councillor Durkin. Right. Councillor Gunn before I sum up.
Well, I'm glad that the report has given so much joy to councillors across the chamber on all sides, and to reiterate what Councillor Harvey said, yes, Patrick Bain, we've got some excellent officers working for the council in all service areas, and it's been a pleasure having Patrick within the environment portfolio area who has done a huge amount of good for Harlow over many years. And there are many others who deserve credit for this, who go far, far beyond this chamber. Someone has caught my eye, I forgot to mention earlier, and she's looking at me right at my gaze. Her Majesty the Queen, I just want to quickly mention, pay tribute to her. And just to make it clear that what we will be doing with the tree planting this year is ensuring it is in line with the Queen's Green Canopy initiative, and the council is working on this with the Office of the Lord Lieutenant of Essex, and we're hoping to involve community groups and certainly one or two schools, hopefully, with that work as well. And since she's still staring at me, I thought I should have mentioned that. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Just a brief aside, I was there when the Queen planted a tree in 1957. So.
Where was it?
It's in Portage Church.
Well, a wonderful report. I'm very heartened by the comments that have gone around the room and some of the questions that have been put to the portfolio holder. I'm particularly pleased around the work around single-use plastics, and I'm very excited about the work that the Wood Trust are doing, and our commitment to try and implement some of the new technologies around that later on in the programme. It shows that it's a very rounded approach and not one-sided approach just to plant trees, but we're thinking of all the various aspects here. I'm particularly pleased that there's an emphasis on the maintenance and making sure that we're not biting off more than we can chew, and that there's enough funding here to maintain this and to get that very ambitious success rate there. It won't be easy, but I'm very heartened by the ambitious target that's been set out in this paper. I echo the points around volunteers. Volunteers are critical to most things that council of ours will do, and I pay tribute to all of those that have been mentioned, ECHO, etc. I think this paper underlines and underscores this administration's commitment to net zero. Could have been very easy not to have embarked upon this, and there are many other pressing issues, but we recognise that the environment is one of the pressing issues of the day, and I pay testament to Councillor Gunn's efforts in this regard, and note his magnanimous thanks to all those that have gone before and have worked with him to get this to where it is, standing on the shoulders of giants, no doubt. I'm pleased that we've been able to sprinkle a little gold dust, and the Conservative administration has been able to provide an oasis for the administration here, and we intend to do that more and more often, cross-party support, and if you so wish, I can arrange for a membership card for the Conservative Party to be winging its way to council. I'm sure the membership form will sit and gather dust though, but I can do it digitally, so we save on the paper. A wonderful report. Thank all those concerned. Therefore, I move to the vote to take recommendations A through to D on this paper. All those in favour? Agreed. Thank you. Any against? No. Thank you very much indeed. Right. I'm sure the officers are going to tell me in 5 minutes' time that we are reaching a special point. Am I okay to ask the question now? Councillors, are we okay to continue with the rest of the report? Can I see those in favour of us continuing, please? Agreed. Thank you very much. We will continue then. Moving to item 12 on page 146 to 201, the Harlow and Guildford Garden Town Transport Strategy. Councillor Mike Hardwin, you're proposing this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to follow Councillor Gunn, but we'll give it a go. Transport strategy. This has been around for a long, long time, and many are very familiar with it. It is the transport strategy that will guide the development of Harlow in the future. It is a long-term strategy, certainly 15, but probably up to 30 years. It is the Harlow Gilsford Garden Town document. Which has now been adopted and is to be implemented by the partner councils. It has been somewhat controversial, prompting debate, which is understandable and welcome. It is also topical, with COP26 taking place in Glasgow as we speak, trying to save the planet. This transport strategy will mould future development and help us make our contribution to reducing climate change in the coming years. Key elements of the transport strategy is to create a transport hierarchy to prioritise transport modes, reducing the need to travel and making walking and cycling the more sustainable, and the single occupancy journeys by car the least sustainable. I'm not going to detail the whole document because it is quite long and I'm sure you've read it, but the highlights are: the one objective is to achieve the 50% and 60% modal shift targets. There are 3 principles: creating a transport hierarchy, as I've just said, encouraging a culture of active and sustainable travel, and accessibility and inclusion. And there are 8 key actions: reducing the need to travel, making better use of existing infrastructure, supporting and encouraging a culture of active and sustainable travel, sustainable transport corridors, supporting walking and cycling, public transport, infrastructure for road-based travel, and anticipating change. Anticipating change is quite important because obviously things are rapidly moving. The strategy has been comprehensively consulted on 2 occasions, first in February 2020 and then in autumn 2020. The latter particularly focused on younger people, with 25% of respondents being from people under the age of 24, which is a good result. Specific workshop events were held with Harlow College, Harlow Youth Council, Epping Youth Council, Harlow Growth Board, and a voluntary sector workshop, as well as member briefings, which most of you attended. Much use of social media was made for the second consultation, with over 2,300 individual interactions with the consultation via this route. It has been identified that the consultation featured on the social media feeds of more than 40,000 people. There were 2 significant post-consultation changes to the document, principally as a result of the input from our members here in Harlow. The first one, there is now a section on electric cars, although there was much debate as these were not considered to be sustainable, as they do not have any impact on congestion. The document does highlight that electric vehicles are part of the solution to move people in gentle steps towards zero carbon alternatives. And the other change was that, as of the outset, the changes to come from this strategy will not happen overnight. As I've said, this is a long-term strategy. The strategy now more clearly acknowledges that this is a long-term set of aspirations. It is not suggested that we are moving to the modal shift targets with immediate effect overnight. This is initially a plan to 2033, but will be achieved as new transport alternatives are developed. But we will be delivered beyond that period up to 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harlow. Do I see a second to the report? Thank you, Councillor Swords. So we move into questions. Any questions on the memorandum last night report? Councillor Harlow.
Thank you, Chair. I think that was a very large comment that you made, Councillor Harlow. This is a document that we're all very familiar with, which of course is a good thing. I have a question around the modal shift, or the ambition that 60% of journeys made from the new Harlow Gilston Town developments will be sustainable, and 50% from the existing estates will be sustainable. And I note that at the moment the estimate is that, is it me giving feedback? No. That the estimate is that about 20% of journeys are made sustainably. Something which occurred to me on reading the report for tonight, which hadn't occurred to me before, is around the need to ensure some kind of parity of progress on achieving improvements, so that, I guess what I'm thinking is, for the new estates where the infrastructure is to be built from scratch, I presume it will be much easier to make rapid progress on a target towards 60% than potentially will be on an existing estate where there's tons of existing issues. It was built 50, 60 years ago. It wasn't built with these kind of challenges in mind. And I just wonder, I guess I was a little bit concerned after the council meeting last week when we were talking about retrofitting existing estates. We talked before about this concern about having a kind of donut town where the new estates, the new buildings are far superior than to our existing estates. And I guess this is just a question to highlight that. How can we ensure that we don't make more rapid progress towards these very desirable targets and outcomes, which will have better health impacts because the air quality will be better. People will have more options in terms of transport, all that kind of stuff. How do we ensure that we keep the progress at a fair and equal pace? And I recognise that possibly isn't something you can answer tonight, but just to put that out there as a consideration.
Councillor Harlow, and I believe Councillor Swords wants to add something to the answer to that question.
Thank you for that question. And yes, the targets are ambitious, although the government has now adopted the 50% target across the country. The only way you are going to get people, existing residents and new residents, to adopt more sustainable behaviours, shall we say, is to provide the alternatives. So it's key that our sustainable transport corridors are in place, hopefully, before any new development happens. So that the new residents adopt that kind of travel pattern. If they can get into the town centre quickly, easily, in a quality transport, which is cheap, they'll do it. But also those sustainable transport corridors have to go through existing residents, and they will see this new transport and think, well, I will try that. So that's the way. Providing the alternative and making it a good alternative will get people to do that shift. And the other thing, of course, is walking and cycling. And I'm going to take your. I'll let Councillor Swords.
We all know it's the best cycle highway in the world.
Coming soon. Any day now.
Take the word for it. You will hear a fantastic announcement on cycle tracks coming very soon.
Very soon. Very soon.
And I'll make sure Councillor Durkin rides up.
Absolutely, I'll be there with you, mate.
To the announcement, but on the wider point about the infrastructure, particularly in existing areas, cycle tracks are in need of major works, and I again believe I looked at some data yesterday that I think in the first 6 years of it's quite an obscure fact, but in the first 6 years of inhabitants in the new town, 92% of journeys were made using the cycle paths. And I'm not for a moment suggesting we may hit that figure again, but if we can massively improve the infrastructure, I passionately believe we will see a huge modal shift from existing residents in that way.
Councillor Harvey, you have a second question?
Just to come back so quickly and say the footage which I've seen, which you may have seen, the black and white footage of the early days, has like people going to work, like hundreds of cyclists, and it's really extraordinary. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the case, and I think that's a very exciting part of the plans. So thank you so much.
Okay, I believe Councillor Edwards is gesticulating to ask a question.
You talk about the transport being cheap. So has there been any economic modelling done on the transport that will be provided?
Councillor Harlow?
Essex County Council are looking, or have been looking, quite detailed at the sustainable transport corridors. They've only started looking at what's actually going to go on. And in fact, we have the cabinet member coming to Harlow week after next to discuss what's going to go on, and that will be the start of that phase.
Further questions, Councillor Edwards?
Yeah, I may just come back. My reason for asking the question, I'm acutely aware in other parts of the country that there is a campaign to, for example, ensure that bus services, etc., in terms of pricing, are similar to what's being priced in terms of London. So I just wonder whether or not Essex could also embrace that possibility. You know, if we are going to get a modal shift onto the buses, onto whatever form this sustainable transport provides, then I think that it's about how do we evolve. So put that in the question.
If I just may, I appreciate your reason, your wish to sort of almost justify your question. You don't need to justify your questions. If your questions can stand alone, and if you want to elaborate or beef that out, please say it to the comment section, because if everybody justifies their question, it doubles the amount of time and it does reduce the time for questioning. So I appreciate your point, but I would like to move to questions strictly, please. Any further questions? Can you ask a question?
Can I answer this question? Well, yes, sorry, to answer your question, one of the prefaces for the sustainable transport corridors said they have to be affordable, and yes, the London transport model is one that's to be discussed.
Further questions? Okay. Happy for comments and for further elucidations on rationale. Councillor Carter. Oh, sorry, I should have specified. You both put your hands up at the same time. I was looking at Councillor David Carter, now point to you, Simon Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is a really, really good report, and basically going on the bit about 50% and the 60%, if sustainable transport means that people believe it is affordable, it is worthwhile getting on those buses, or whatever transport system is available, and they like it, they will use it. And if they believe it is too expensive, if they believe it is not a good ride to go on, they won't use it. And I think that will be the crux of the matter. If it is acceptable to the public at a reasonable price, it will be used and you will achieve your ambitions. Thank you.
Councillor Simon Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Harvey, this is a well-thumbed, well-read report, and what I can't quote from it verbatim. It has been around for a couple of years, and people have had plenty of opportunity by now to ask questions about it. Councillor Harlow said that this version had two changes. I'd like to point out there are in fact three changes. The last time this came around, say about a year or so ago, I pointed out that there is, or there was no or little emphasis on accessibility and people supporting people with disabilities. And I'm pleased to note that accessibility is now a major thread running all the way through the document, and I very much welcome that. And I shall be ordering my copy in March as soon as.
Before I come to you, Councillor Harlow, are there any further comments? Okay, Councillor Harlow, I'll come to you and then I'll sum up.
Thank you, Chair. You did spot that they've changed the three principles, and the last one is accessibility and inclusion. So it is quite a key theme throughout the whole document there. Yes, this is an important document that has been around for a very, very long time. We've all had plenty of opportunity to read it and make comments. It has changed to some degree. It has been extensively consulted on. So I think the document is there and ready for adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, it's been a major undertaking by many, many people. And the thing that I would echo from around the room is that we make sure that any sustainable transport, and by very definition, it has to be cheap and affordable. It has to be a better alternative to the car. It cannot be a race to the bottom where we make other things more difficult for people. We need to move up and make that sustainable transport desirable. And that's certainly going to be our key ambition. So with that in mind, I'm going to move recommendations A through to F on block. All those in favour? Agreed? Okay, thank you. No against. So thank you for that. We now come to item 13, pages 202 and 212 of the pack, Health and Wellbeing Strategy Positioning Statement I look to the Deputy Leader, Joel Charles. Mr. Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose this report.
Okay, and if you'd like to speak to it, then I'll get a second.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this health and wellbeing strategy positioning statement is twofold. First of all, it is to set out the Council's current position and intentions based on a strategic narrative that is set out in the following pages. The purpose of this is to begin the conversation around what our health and wellbeing priorities should be post the lockdowns as we progress, still very carefully monitoring COVID-19 and the infection levels in the town. But we cannot discard the other more pressing priorities in the town, and also focus on addressing health inequalities more broadly, which is one of the Council's community leadership roles. This, of course, will be informed by data, and as I have said at many full councils and cabinet meetings, we are awaiting the Essex Strategic Needs Assessment data. We've also been following in symmetry the work that Essex Council, the West Essex Clinical Commissioning Group, the One Health and Care Partnership are doing around updating their own health and wellbeing priorities. The focus for us going forward is to acknowledge the fact that we do need to have a full and robust health and wellbeing partnership board strategy for 2022-2025. What you will see in the strategy as you pass the report and the issues that are explored is a focus by this council not just on the long-term impacts of COVID-19, but some of the other broader issues that impact many generations in this town, whether it is sexual health, whether it is understanding the challenges and opportunities of our ageing population, and what is presented as a result of the health and well-being challenges that there may well be borne out as a result of that. But also a focus on recognising that we need to achieve greater parity between mental health and physical health. That is set out as broadly as we can in this strategic narrative, informed by data when we get there. And I very much welcome comments from councillors as we get into the questions and debate. Thank you, Chair.
I might gladly second that report. Can I move to questions on the report for Councillor Charles? Councillor Edwards, your motion.
Thank you. Firstly, just put in an open comment, really. Basically, I can totally understand why you're at the position that you are now, given that the amount of new information that's going to be coming, demographic information, etc. is going to be coming in. Just a couple of questions, really. Para 6, page 204, there's mention of the community hub. The community hub is funded up until March 2022. I just wonder what work is currently being done to ensure continued funding after that time.
I am very pleased that at previous cabinets we announced the fact that we have a new type of community hub, the 90,000 that has come in as a result of government money that's supplied by Essex County Council. That the undertaking that I gave to Councillor Edwards at that previous cabinet, we're very keen to have a cross-party conversation, one about the data and considerations about funding. But of course, any funding decision locks into the discussions around the municipal budget, but also the wider considerations of funding that there may well be as a result of government funding and what Essex County Council's priorities are in the months ahead. What I would also say is that not only this council but the government is watching the infection levels, and as a result of that we need to see how the next months pan out for winter, and the reports that we have seen facing our own acute care provision in the town and primary care. I know that a number of councillors were recently on the call with the West Essex CCG where that was discussed at length. So there are a number of multiple factors that are into consideration here, and the funding may be attached to those emerging priorities. But it's too early to say at the moment whether they may be borne out.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Edwards?
Moving down, how firm is the anticipated timetable given in para 11, page 12.5? Talks of autumn 2022 for completion of that. He talks of autumn 2022 for completion of that work. So is that a firm commitment to that?
As Councillor Edwards will know, the development of the health and wellbeing strategy is developed in collaboration with, of course, Epping Forest and Nuttlesford. Our ambition is to fulfil all we have set out in the report, following, as I hope, Cabinet's agreement to this positioning statement. We will go forward and have those conversations with partners about how we progress the health and wellbeing strategy going forward. But my ambition, Councillor Edwards, is that we have to be proactive around these priorities. They may evolve. We might be facing a fluid situation in the coming months. But I'm trying to leave that room for us to have those discussions with partners, not just from a local authority perspective, but the health professionals that will help guide us as we build this out as a community leader.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Edwards?
Just a couple. Page 212, point 3, talks about supporting targeted work with minority groups, and it lists them. I see there's no mention there of people with learning disabilities. I'm certain that was an unintended oversight. And my question is, could that group be included in that list, please?
Councillor Charles?
The intention of the health and wellbeing strategy is to address the health and wellbeing needs of all residents in the town, irrespective of the status they may have as an individual. There will be parity in the way that the council addresses their health and wellbeing needs. That is a cast iron guarantee by this administration, and there will be one of the main objectives here is to address any potential isolation that individuals may have been confronted over the last 18 months as a result of the pandemic. Our ambition is to make sure that we support all our residents, irrespective of the challenges that we face going forward.
Yeah, let me just come back on that briefly. It's just that we recently did a piece of work, as you know, reviewing the accommodation needs of people with learning disabilities in the town. I do just get concerned, as I say, when they are a significant group in the town, you know, there's, again, just a request to go back to just the one looks again, or possibly just including them, making certain that they're included as a grouping.
Chair, they are included under the definition of, not my definition, but the official definition around critically extremely vulnerable, and that under that definition, those individuals are classed within that. But look, my priority is, as I said, to support wellbeing needs of all residents in the town, and it is covered under that definition.
Thank you. Further questions?
The rest of it, I think, is comment later.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions on this particular report? Then I refer back to you, Councillor Edwards, for your comments.
As I said right at the beginning, I can totally understand the need for the collation of new information, demographic information, health information, etc. going forward, so I totally accept that. I also think, in terms of a comment, I think it would be very useful if a brief report could be done, a brief report or presentation to Cabinet could be done on the work that the Harlow Health and Wellbeing Partnership have done to date, really. Just in the same way as the work that we've done recently in this evening's meeting, talking about all the work that's been going on with, in terms of the biodiversity, etc. There's a huge amount of work that those groups that could be celebrated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any further comment before I go to Councillor Charles and I sum up? Okay, Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the comments from Councillor Edwards. What I would say to Councillor Edwards about his comment there is what we've got to take into consideration here is the sequencing of all of this. I think the priority is to lay down the strategic intent which we are endeavouring to do, have a conversation with our local authority partners, build a consensus with the health professionals from an acute and primary care perspective to take this forward. Because I don't want to lose any momentum around addressing not just the long-term potential impacts of COVID-19, which we still need to understand at local level, but also the wider health and wellbeing challenges, whether that is considerations around obesity, sexual health, or the challenges, but also opportunities of ageing population, which I set out in my introduction. That is the aim of work that we're doing as a community leaders council, and we will, once the data is there and we can make more of a judgment based on the evidence, we will build out this positioning paper with our colleagues in the local government to ensure that by 2022-25 we have a robust health and wellbeing strategy that meets the current challenges and then looks towards the long term about how we need to position ourselves for the ongoing health and wellbeing needs of the town more generally.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. It's a very serious piece of work. It has some very serious impacts. I hope it benefits many. And this is, I won't labour and go over the many points you've raised there, but suffice to say, this is an example where we will need to collaborate with partners, we need to work out, and it goes beyond COVID, which whilst it doesn't underplay that, and we realise it's a very real and immediate threat still, it looks beyond and it starts to position ourselves, as you say, looking at the wider and more longer term health impacts that the people of town may be facing. So I commend that, the work that you and others have done in compiling this report. I'm now going to, I would also like to add as well, it's very heartening to see the opposition taking a very keen interest in this. I know Councillor Charles, if I may, is very keen to work cross-party, and thank your contributions there, Councillor Edwards, and others of your colleagues that have made comments along the way. That being said, I'd like to move recommendations A and B on pages 202 of this report. Can I see those all in favour? Thank you, I see none against, so that's carried. Now we move to communications from committees, working groups, parties and panels. There is one on page 213 to 244. I note that you just want to make a brief statement on this, Councillor, before we make a decision on this.
Yeah, just a quick one. This document, Statement of Community Involvement, sets out how we will consult residents on our forward planning functions, such as the local plan review, new community infrastructure levy, supplementary planning documents, and with development control planning applications. I went into some considerable detail at full council last week on the changes we are considering as part of the ongoing review. I'm not going to reiterate them all tonight. I can see that I'm just very grateful for that. Some of those have been included within this report. The aim is to make our forward planning and development control activities as transparent and accessible as they can be for the three participants which in the planning process, which is the applicants themselves, the public and the council. I so move this report.
Thank you. Given it is a communication from other working groups, I'm just going to ask, if I may, if unless councillors have burning desire to ask questions or make comments, I'm going to move straight to the vote on the recommendation. I will second that, by the way. You wish to ask a question, Councillor Carson, your prerogative.
Make a comment.
I'll comment, please do.
Thank you. It's my usual comment on papers like this. I'm very pleased to see that on the inside cover of the draft that we've presented, it says the council will provide this document in alternative formats such as large print. So I'll order my copy in large print now, if I may. But it's pleasing to see that throughout the whole of the document, accessibility again is a key issue in terms of consultation and actually communicating with people. So if I keep on plugging, we make it there eventually. Thank you.
Look to Councillor Vincent, just say a beg your indulgence and just move straight to the vote on this one, if that's okay with you. Okay, so councillors, if we can move to the vote on recommendation A and B on page 213. Agreed. Thank you very much. Minutes, item 15, minutes of panels and working groups. There are none. Matters of urgent business are not being notified really. And the time I close this meeting is at 5 to 10. I thank you all for your attendance, contributions. I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you.